Bornholm, a picturesque Danish island nestled in the heart of the Baltic Sea, has long been known for its tranquil landscapes, charming fishing villages, and a pace of life that seems untouched by the outside world. For generations, Bornholm was a favorite getaway for Danes and visitors alike, a place where the worries of the wider world felt distant and remote. But today, the island finds itself thrust into the global spotlight, caught in the crosshairs of a growing standoff between NATO and Russia. The once peaceful waters surrounding Bornholm now echo with the hum of military patrols and the presence of warships as tensions in the region escalate. Bornholm's unique location, situated between Poland, Sweden, Germany, and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad, has transformed it from a quiet retreat into a strategic flashpoint. Its position in the Baltic Sea makes it a key point of interest for both Western and Russian military planners, who see control of the island as vital to securing maritime routes and projecting power in the region. In recent months, Moscow has accused Denmark and its NATO allies of militarizing Bornholm, claiming that the island is being turned into a forward operating base for Western forces. Russian officials warn that these moves threaten the delicate balance of power in the Baltic and have issued stern statements from the Kremlin, raising the stakes in an already tense situation. NATO, for its part, insists that its actions are purely defensive. The alliance argues that increased military presence and exercises in the Baltic region are necessary to deter potential aggression and to reassure member states that their security is guaranteed. For NATO, Bornholm is not just a piece of land, but a critical link in a chain of defense stretching across northern Europe. Russia, however, views these developments with deep suspicion. Russian leaders claim that NATO is using the pretext of a supposed Russian threat to justify its expansion and military buildup. They argue that the West is encroaching ever closer to Russian borders, fueling a cycle of mistrust and military posturing that threatens to spiral out of control. This clash of narratives has left Bornholm's residents feeling uneasy, as their island becomes a symbol of the broader mistrust and tension gripping Europe. Local communities, once focused on fishing and tourism, now find themselves living at the edge of a geopolitical fault line, uncertain about what the future may hold. As NATO and Russia continue to trade accusations and flex their military muscles, the fate of Bornholm hangs in the balance. The island's future could serve as a bellwether for the direction of NATO-Russia relations and for the stability of the entire Baltic region. NATO has ramped up its military presence on Bornholm, conducting frequent air patrols, joint exercises, and deploying advanced weapon systems. Denmark, as a NATO member, supports these actions as essential for collective defense and regional stability. Bornholm's strategic position allows NATO to monitor Baltic Sea traffic and rapidly deploy forces if needed. The alliance frames this as deterrence, not provocation. Russia, however, views the buildup as a direct threat, accusing NATO of disrupting the military balance in the region. The presence of non-Baltic NATO forces, especially from the US, heightens Moscow's suspicions. This cycle of action and reaction is fueling a dangerous spiral of mistrust. NATO's expanded air patrols over Bornholm are a major point of contention. Alliance jets and surveillance planes now regularly fly over the island and the Baltic Sea, officially to protect Allied airspace. Russia claims these flights are provocative, alleging that U.S. bombers use Bornholm's airspace to approach sensitive Russian targets undetected. Moscow argues these patrols are not just defensive, but are rehearsals for potential conflict. For NATO, robust air presence is about deterrence. For Russia, it's a sign of encirclement. The same flight can be seen as routine or as a threat, depending on the observer. The skies above Bornholm have become a new front in the standoff. Bornholm now hosts regular joint military exercises, bringing together Danish and other NATO troops, especially Americans. These exercises are not just routine drills. They are carefully planned events that involve months of preparation and coordination between multiple nations. Soldiers from different backgrounds and languages must learn to operate as a single unified force, overcoming barriers of communication and tactics. The presence of American troops alongside their Danish counterparts is a visible symbol of the alliance's commitment to collective security, and it sends a powerful message to both allies and potential adversaries. These drills test rapid deployment, logistics, and coordinated defense, aiming to ensure seamless cooperation in a crisis. Troops practice everything from setting up temporary command posts to responding to simulated attacks, honing their ability to react quickly and efficiently under pressure. The exercises also include complex scenarios such as cyber defense and joint air-sea operations, reflecting the evolving nature of modern warfare. By working together in realistic conditions, NATO forces build trust and familiarity, which are crucial in the event of a real emergency. For NATO, such exercises demonstrate unity and readiness, sending a clear message of collective defense. The sight of multinational troops standing shoulder to shoulder is meant to reassure member states and deter any potential aggression. These joint maneuvers are also opportunities to showcase new technology, share best practices, and strengthen the bonds that hold the alliance together. The public display of solidarity is as important as the military training itself, reinforcing the idea that an attack on one is an attack on all. Russia sees them as provocative, arguing that foreign troops so close to its borders simulate offensive operations. Russian officials and state media often highlight these exercises as evidence of NATO's aggressive intentions, fueling domestic narratives of encirclement and threat. The proximity of large-scale maneuvers to Russian territory is a source of ongoing tension, with Moscow warning that such activities undermine regional stability and increase the risk of miscalculation. Moscow claims Denmark is enabling NATO's power projection, raising tensions in the Baltic. Russian leaders argue that the presence of foreign troops and advanced weaponry so close to their borders is a direct challenge to their security. They accuse Denmark and other NATO members of escalating the situation, rather than promoting peace and stability in the region. The focus on rapid reinforcement is viewed by Russia as practice for intervention, not just defense. Russian analysts scrutinize every aspect of these drills, interpreting them as rehearsals for potential offensive operations. This perception leads to increased military activity on the Russian side, as they prepare their own forces to respond to any perceived threat. What NATO calls deterrence, Russia calls escalation. The two sides remain locked in a cycle of action and reaction, each interpreting the other's moves through a lens of suspicion and rivalry. Public protests and official statements reflect the deep mistrust that now characterizes relations between Russia and the alliance. Each exercise deepens the divide and prompts countermeasures. As both sides continue to build up their forces and refine their strategies, the risk of misunderstanding or accidental escalation grows. The Baltic region has become a focal point for this new era of military competition, where every maneuver is closely watched and every signal carefully analyzed. The deployment of advanced missile systems like HIMARS and the Typhoon launcher to Bornholm has alarmed Russia. These systems, capable of firing long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles, even temporarily, are seen by Moscow as a major escalation. Russia argues that such weapons cross a red line, reviving fears of intermediate-range missiles in Europe. NATO insists these deployments are about credible deterrence and realistic training. For Russia, it's proof of NATO's aggressive intent and a trigger for its own military buildup. The presence of dual-capable missiles near Russian territory raises the risk of rapid escalation. Each new system on Bornholm intensifies the arms race dynamic. Russia has repeatedly claimed that NATO's recent military buildup on the Danish island of Bornholm is not a response to any real danger, but rather is based on what Moscow calls a fabricated threat. According to Russian officials, the Western alliance is exaggerating the risk posed by Russia in order to justify its own actions and presence in the region. This accusation has become a central talking point in Russian state media, fueling public skepticism about NATO's intentions and raising questions about the true motivations behind the alliance's maneuvers. Moscow's official stance is clear. It insists that Russia harbors no aggressive intentions toward Denmark, the Baltic states, or any of its European neighbors. Russian diplomats and spokespeople have repeatedly accused NATO of inventing the idea of a Russian menace, arguing that this narrative is being used to justify the alliance's continued expansion eastward. In their view, the West is deliberately stoking fears to rally support for increased military budgets and a stronger NATO presence near Russian borders. Russian officials argue that the situation on Bornholm is being used as a convenient pretext by NATO to ramp up military spending and tighten its strategic grip on Europe. They claim that the alliance is less interested in genuine security and more focused on consolidating its influence, using the specter of Russian aggression as a tool to unite member states and justify new deployments. This perspective is echoed by many Russian analysts, who see the buildup as part of a broader pattern of Western encroachment. This narrative is deeply rooted in long-standing resentment over NATO's eastward expansion since the end of the Cold War. For decades, Russian leaders have viewed the alliance's steady approach toward their borders as a direct threat to national security. The memory of past confrontations and broken promises, as perceived by Moscow, continues to shape Russian attitudes and policies today. Protests and public debates in Eastern Europe further highlight the divisive nature of NATO's presence in the region. Every move made by NATO, whether it's a troop deployment, a military exercise, or a new base, is interpreted by Russia as part of a larger offensive strategy, rather than a defensive measure. Russian military analysts frequently discuss these developments in the media, warning that the alliance's actions are designed to contain and pressure Russia, not to maintain peace. Headlines in Russian newspapers often reflect this suspicion, reinforcing the idea that NATO's intentions are far from benign. In response, Russia maintains that it is merely reacting to an increasingly hostile security environment, not provoking it. Russian officials point to the deployment of defensive missile systems and increased border patrols as necessary measures to safeguard their sovereignty. They argue that these actions are a direct consequence of NATO's expansion, not the cause of it, and insist that Russia's primary goal is to ensure its own security in the face of growing external pressure. At the heart of this escalating standoff lies a fundamental dispute: who is the real aggressor, and who is simply defending their interests? As both sides continue to trade accusations and bolster their military positions, the question remains unresolved, fueling mistrust and uncertainty across Europe. Russia often invokes Bornholm's Cold War history as a symbol of stability and restraint. The island remained largely demilitarized even during superpower rivalry, serving as a buffer in the Baltic. Moscow argues that Denmark and NATO are abandoning this tradition, turning Bornholm into a military outpost. Russia frames NATO's actions as a break from a peaceful past, suggesting Denmark is sacrificing stability for alliance politics. The appeal to history is meant to question the wisdom of current policies. Russia claims the crisis is manufactured by NATO, not driven by any new Russian threat. The militarization of Bornholm, in Moscow's view, disrupts a carefully maintained order. The Bornholm dispute reflects the broader deterioration in NATO-Russia relations. Moscow sees NATO's expansion, especially the inclusion of Poland, the Baltics, and Finland, as a direct threat. NATO, in turn, cites Russian actions in Ukraine as justification for reinforcing its eastern flank, including Bornholm. Each side's moves are seen as aggressive by the other, fueling a security dilemma. The Baltic Sea's strategic importance makes Bornholm a sensitive flashpoint. Even limited military activity on the island carries outsized symbolic and strategic weight. Bornholm is now a microcosm of the continent's dangerous rivalry. Bornholm's transformation from tourist haven to military flashpoint highlights the fragility of European security. NATO calls its actions defensive. Russia sees them as direct threats. Moscow says it's open to dialogue but insists on mutual respect and an end to militarization. Western capitals remain skeptical, citing Russia's actions in Ukraine as a barrier to trust. The lack of a shared security language means each side's defense is the other's provocation. For Denmark and NATO, fortifying Bornholm is logical. For Russia, it's escalation. The island's fate now hinges on whether dialogue can replace confrontation. Bornholm stands as a warning of what happens when mistrust goes unchecked.